Based upon some of the comments I'm seeing, I realize that some of you don't really understand how ownership of IPs and games and control of these things actually work. So let's talk about it in a little bit more detail. I'm not going to be able to talk about all the possible different configurations out there. If you know of something that I missed, put it down in the comments and we can add it to our combined knowledge base. Most video game studios these days are wholly owned by publishers. Mostly the big ones like EA and Ubisoft, Microsoft, Sony, Activision up until recently. And in that case, the way that this works is usually pretty simple. The studio is completely contained within that publisher. The publisher owns the studio. The publisher owns the IP that the studio works on. The publisher owns all the technology that was used to make whatever game they're using. If the publisher decides to shut down a game, the IP is still owned by the publisher, and there's very little that anyone can do about it. In these cases, the studio maintains effectively zero independence. They're completely within the organization of the overarching publisher. Examples of this: Blizzard, BioWare. These are most of the studios that you are aware of. They are effectively simply the publisher with a different name attached to them. And there are good reasons why publishers want this. They want brand loyalty associated with specific kinds of games. They're trying to differentiate themselves from themselves in many cases. But legally, effectively, there's no control that exists within the studio itself. It's not a legal entity. So BioWare can't just decide that it's going to leave EA and make another Mass Effect. There's one major example that looks like that happening, and I'm going to try to explain what I think happened there. The example that I'm thinking of is Bungie. Bungie was an independent studio back in the 90s and was acquired by Microsoft and made Halo games for Microsoft. They were a studio that was owned by Microsoft, just like what we were just talking about. But in 2007, Bungie became an independent studio again. And then they went on and made Destiny, and then eventually got acquired again by Sony. So how did they do this? I'm not entirely sure what they did, but one way they could have become an independent studio again was that they basically said that they were leaving as a group and negotiated with Microsoft some deal that allowed them to take the name Bungie with them when they left. Could have been something that was in the original acquisition contract, that the founders were allowed to take the name with them if they ever left. It could have been something they negotiated as a payoff for them to finish the work that they were working on rather than leave early. Maybe they had a constructive dismissal case and they waived it in exchange for getting the rights to Bungie. I don't know specifically, but something happened that meant that Microsoft said, we will let these people leave Microsoft, which of course they can't stop, but we will also let them take the Bungie branding with them when they go. Something additional was required for the name Bungie to go along with the people who were leaving in 2007. But notice that Halo didn't go along with them. They took Bungie, they took the studio name, but they didn't take the game IP along with them when they left. Usually, without some sort of deeper negotiation, that's not what's going to happen. If major people at a studio leave, they go and they found a new studio with a new name and new IPs, because they're not able to take any of these things with them unless there was some sort of specific deal in place. Now, not all studios are wholly owned by publishers. Some exist within other organizations. Some are completely independent. It used to mean indie simply meant that the studio was independent, meaning it wasn't owned by one of the publishers. Now we are having this fight over what indie means for the purposes of games, and I think there's a reasonable conversation to be had there. But for the purposes of this conversation, independent simply means not owned by one of the big publishers. May not mean that you are completely owned by the founders. A lot of independent studios have major investments from other places. They might have major investments from private equity. They might have an angel investor that owns a significant percentage of their company. They might be owned by a company that's hoping to become a video game publisher and is collecting up little bits until they presumably hit critical mass. You could argue that was kind of what Embracer Group was doing, as they were gathering together IPs and studios with the hopes of becoming a publisher, or what I would argue, probably in the hopes of being acquired by someone bigger than them. If you are completely independent and you have no investors, then yeah, you kind of get to decide how everything goes. If you want to decide to stop making sequels to your very successful franchise, you can go for it. If you decide to shut your studio down and start up a new studio making games using that IP, yeah, you own that IP. But once you start bringing in other investors, even if they're not publishers, there are going to be strings attached to that. So if you are starting a studio and you go and get major investment from a big company like, say, NetEase, which was a big investor in the West up until very recently, and then they pull their funding and your studio doesn't have any money anymore, you may not be able to continue. They might take the IP with them. Depending upon the deal that exists, they may have essentially bought the IP as part of the deal where they were giving you money. And while that might seem really bad, and it is pretty bad, when you are a studio looking for enough funding to make the game that you have ambitions to make, you may be forced to make compromises in order to get enough money to do that. So while someone like me might say, I wouldn't start a studio where I'm going to have any investors that are putting any strings on me, that's great, but I'm not currently shipping a game, am I? Investors want something for their money. They want a return. And depending on who you are, depending on your track record, depending on how much money you need, the number of strings that are going to be able to attach to you are going to be highly variable. This doesn't always come with strings attached. Tencent owns around 30% of Larian, but it doesn't seem to have impacted the way they make games, the kinds of games they made. I mean, I guess I don't know exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but so far it doesn't seem like Tencent has been putting their thumb on the scale at all. That is far from being the most common outcome of this. So there are cases where IP control, even for independent studios, doesn't exist with the studio. We are now in a world where traditional publishing isn't as relevant as it once used to be. So for the independent studios, often they are publishing their games on their own or getting a manufacturing partner on the side. But one of the things that exists with these publishing deals is the idea of a right of first refusal. Basically what that means is we retain the right to sign you for anything that comes in the future that involves this IP. We at least have a right to say no before you go and talk to anyone else. This was the case with a lot of BioWare's games before EA purchased them back in 2008. Microsoft had a right of first refusal on Jade Empire, for example. When we were working on a sequel to Jade Empire, Microsoft was the presumed publisher until such point as they said, nah, we don't really want this, at which point we would then be free to go and look for a different publisher. Again, we go back to what we were talking about. The people who are providing you with money want to get something back for their money. So they're going to put all these hooks and attaches and strings on that money in order to try to recoup more than they put in. We are in a world where the people who control the money have an outsized degree of power. From the perspective of the publishers, individual devs are not seen as important enough to pay whatever is required, give whatever is required to acquire that person, to retain that person. Similarly, IPs are not seen as all-consuming enough to be allowed to remain in the control of the organization that may bring them into the fold. If you are a studio that's being acquired by a major publisher and you want to put an asterisk in the acquisition contract that says the studio retains some degree of independence, we retain some degree of control over the IP, that is independent of the acquisition. There is another entity that comes into being that is the founders or some other group of people that maintains control over the IP regardless of this acquisition. Chances are, in almost all cases, the group that is acquiring you is going to say, nah, we're not going to do that. So either you don't get acquired or you cross that thing out of the contract. If you somehow develop the world's most successful IP and maintain your independence, and then you take it to a publisher and say, yeah, we'll bring Fortnite into EA, but we maintain control of Fortnite as an IP, would they be willing to do that? Maybe under some circumstances, but you're going to have to be something that they are so desperate for that they're willing to sign a contract that they would see as really suboptimal. One question that you may ask is, okay, fine, the publishers control the IP, but why don't they do stuff with them? Even if they're not willing to make a game using an IP that is in their vault, why won't they license it out? Why won't they allow it to be turned into something else? And there are a bunch of reasons, and I've talked about some of them in the past. The first and probably most common reason is simply that the amount of money that a publisher would be able to get by licensing out one of their dormant IPs isn't worth their trouble. If you're going to take Wasteland out of the EA vault and try to find someone to license it to make a game, the people that are going to be interested in licensing that aren't going to be interested in paying very much money. So you're either going to get a flat fee of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or a very small percentage. And the reality is that the amount of money you likely spend in lawyers and simply brokering that deal is more than you're going to make on that IP. It's not true of all the IPs in the publisher's vault, but a lot of them, EA's got a lot of IPs in its vault, and a lot of them aren't really worth very much. So maybe under some sort of fire sale condition, you package up 50 of them and sell the whole works for a couple $1 million. But individually, they're not worth very much. One of the things that also keeps publishers from trying to find ways to exploit these IPs is opportunity costs. So if they are making a game using one of these IPs, the way they think is that means they're not spending those resources on something else. And in a lot of cases, there are a couple of very successful things at these publishers that wash out a lot of this experimentation. So there isn't a desire to try to make a Wasteland RPG at EA. They would rather spend those 15, 20, 25, 30 resources making a better FIFA that makes more money. The other thing that happens is a culture of avoiding blame. If you let an IP sit fallow, you're not making any money on it, but you're also not really getting in trouble for letting it sit fallow, because it's largely ignored and people forget they even own it, and it doesn't really cost you anything to do nothing with an IP. If you attempt to do something with the IP and it fails and you spend a bunch of money on it, you might get in trouble. If you license it out and it does super well, but your deal wasn't very good, you might get in trouble. If you license it out and it turns out the studio you licensed it to turn out to be a PR disaster, you might get in trouble. So what often happens at these larger corporations is you have pockets of people who live their careers trying to avoid blame as opposed to trying to do anything great. And as a result, they just take the path of least resistance. And the reality is, for IP control, usually the path of least resistance is to simply take the IP that you own that isn't super valuable, that isn't screaming to be made into a game, and just quietly leave it alone in the vault where it sits. You just don't do anything with it. So the reality is we live in a world where almost all IP is controlled by large publishers, not by individual studios. We live in a world where individual devs only have control over what happens in a game while they are at a studio. They do not take that control with them. It's not attached to them, it's attached to the role that they do. And we live in a world where, in many cases, publishers would rather see an IP lie fallow than allow somebody else to extract revenue from something that they own. Let me address another misconception right here at the end to hopefully inject a little bit of hope into this otherwise slightly grim video. A spiritual successor is a game which is reminiscent of an existing IP, which may draw back into the past of other IPs, but is not actually directly connected to that IP at all. Usually these are made by people who were involved in the game but do not control that IP. So if you are interested in making a game that is a spiritual successor to Anthem, you are free to do so. Nobody is going to stop you, because you're not making a sequel to Anthem. You're not making a game in the Anthem universe. You're making a game with flying mech suits in a dangerous, jungly world. That's not something that you're going to be able to enforce a copyright on. As long as you aren't drawing too many direct parallels, you can make such a game without being afraid of crossing into some sort of copyright infringement territory. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We also have a Patreon if you're more interested in supporting the channel in that way. Both patrons and channel members get early access to videos, so you would have seen this video a while ago if you were supporting the channel in that way. We also have merch. I'm wearing a very old hoodie at the moment. That is another way to support the channel. What IPs do you wish would get out into the world and be available for people to work with? We are a very long way from any video game IPs entering into the public domain, but we do have some companies like Embracer Group that are effectively IP holding companies, and we may see a world where some of those acquisitions get spun off and thrown back out into the soup. What do you wish was out there available to be made into a game once again? Let's talk about that down in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.